Jazakallah for everyone who's tuned in to watch this today. Today, we're going to be answering your questions on COVID-19 coronavirus. We have a panel of Murabbiyan doctors and the Khidmat-e-Khalq team with us today. First on our panel, we have Dr. Ali Gondal, who is a junior doctor working in Walsal and is on the front line on the fight against coronavirus. We also have Malik Saab, who is part of the Khidmat-e-Khalq UK team and has been working to help people get through the current pandemic. And then we also have Rabeeb Mirza Saab, who is a Murabbi in Feltham. We have a very nice panel of questions today that we'll be discussing, and we think we'll jump straight into it. So, Dr. Saab, if I can come to you with the first question. Can you just sort of describe what the current situation is in hospitals at the moment? You know, we hear a lot of things on the news, but I think it's very difficult for people to sort of understand what is actually going on in the hospital. So I was wondering if you could just sort of give us a bit of a breakdown on that.
Yep, so I've just come from my shift, which was on AMU cover, where we've turned 4 of the 6 wards into COVID wards. And on most of the bays, most people are sat there with a confirmed positive diagnosis of COVID. So the numbers have started picking up. Like the government was saying, we're expecting this is where the start of the peak is going to start building up. So the numbers in our hospital have started building up. We've got around over 100 confirmed cases now. We've turned 4 wards into COVID wards already, where people have got confirmed diagnoses. And each week where more and more wards are being dedicated especially to COVID. So AMU today, like I was saying, 4 bays are already COVID. So the numbers are picking up there. And in terms of the ITU, our normal ITU beds, which is about 16 to 18 capacity, have filled up. And now the measures to increase their capacity is being put into place. So the theatre, recovery rooms, the surgery that aren't running their wards are being converted into ITU. So the space for ITU is being increased. So that's the numbers we've reached. And we're expecting that within the next week or 2, the numbers will significantly pick up as well.
Okay. So it really is sort of as bad as, you know, we are sort of hearing on the news in terms of the situation is really quite dire then.
Yeah, you know, some people are thinking that the news is trying to make this sound scarier than it is, but when you're on the front line, you see that it's not. We're not over exaggerating what we're seeing on the front line. Most of all the hospital is genuine admissions now. Most of the medical take, we're seeing suspected COVID or confirmed COVIDs. So the other patients that used to come to A&E with minor illnesses, there's none of those patients now. It's all people are genuine, and most of them have got COVID symptoms now. And we're okay for beds at the minute, but we're expecting to have the numbers pick up even further. But we've gone from a few cases. Our first case was about 2.5 weeks ago, and now our numbers are up to over 100, and we've got over about 10 to 15 confirmed on ITU at the minute.
Okay. And then, you know, from what Dr. Saab is saying, Mussawir Saab, I'd like to come to you next. You know, it seems that the situation is progressing and things are getting worse, and you know, it's more important now than ever for people to isolate and, you know, keep away, as the government advice is saying. If someone is experiencing, you know, minor symptoms or more mild symptoms and they are self-isolating, what sort of help can they get in terms of, you know, basics, you know, sort of getting supplies or getting their prescriptions? You know, what help is Jamaat sort of offering on this?
So I think at the moment, the first thing is follow government guidelines and stay put at home. Don't panic. The best procedure is either to call the Humanity First helpline or contact us on our email, which is direct to us, help@qadam.co.uk. What happens in this procedure is, you know, you stay put at home, you make us aware of who you are, leave a mobile number with us and tell us your location. Once that information comes through to us, we pass it on straight to the closest region to you or your local Qiyadat as well. And we speak to the coordinators in that area. We make sure that they communicate with you, they stay in touch with you, and they go out and essentially basically get everything that you need in order for you to be comfortable whilst you're at home. So we've been doing this now for 2 weeks now at the moment, just over 2 weeks. And alhamdulillah, it's been it's picking up a lot more now, as you can imagine, as we're getting a lot more cases. But yeah, this has become natural for us at the moment for every region in the country as well.
Okay, so this sort of response is across the UK, you know, from Scotland to all the way to London, I take it then.
Yeah, so we've got 24 regions up and down the country. Scotland, Wales is also covered as well. So, you know, London's been getting majority of the requests, but I've been getting requests in my local area. We've had some in Scotland. This is not just internal as well, it's external as well, it's for anyone. So we've had quite a few requests up and down the country. Where it starts to pick up a lot more in those areas, we're starting to get more requests there as well. So we cover the whole of the UK at the moment.
Okay, excellent. And Murabbi Sahib, I'd like to come to you next. I was wondering if you could just sort of give us a bit of an idea of what sort of precautions Islam gives in terms of protecting ourselves from, you know, various pandemics and pandemics like we're seeing at the moment.
Absolutely. So, Jazakallah for having me today. It's very interesting that, you know, the teachings which the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, gave 1400 years ago, they are even more, or I should say, we are even more duty bound today in light of this pandemic to follow those instructions for our welfare and for the welfare of the society at large. You know, for example, one such commandment where the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, he mentioned that La adwa wa la tiyarata wa la hamata wa la safara wa firra min al majzumi kama tafirru min al asadi. So the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam stated that every ailment, every illness is not contagious within itself unless God gives the commandment. And then the Holy Prophet ﷺ has mentioned some bad omens and some superstitious ailments that were at the time of Jahiliyyah, meaning the time of ignorance amongst the Arabs. And thereafter the Holy Prophet ﷺ mentioned something very interesting. He said, وَفِرَّ مِنَ الْمَجْزُومِ كَمَا تَفِرُّ مِنَ الْأَسَدِ, that run away, distance yourself from a leper just as you would distance yourself or run away from a lion. And you know, the actual symptoms of the coronavirus, they are saying that it is quite similar to leprosy, for example, especially in particular when a person coughs or, you know, a person sneezes. And you know, those droplets, if they come into contact with you, you can actually contract the virus as such. So in regards to leprosy, the Holy Prophet ﷺ gave this commandment, and therefore this stands by for the coronavirus as well. The Holy Prophet ﷺ also mentioned, and just imagine 1400 years ago, in regards to social distancing, he mentioned that when you come into contact with a leper, there should be a distance the width of a spear, roughly basically meaning 6 feet. And nowadays, if you know, 6 feet is roughly 2 meters, and they are saying that the social distancing should be at 2 meters. So 1400 years ago, the Holy Prophet ﷺ mentioned this factor. Hazrat Muslim Maud, the second caliph of the community, when he came here in 1924 and delivered an address at the Wembley conference, he mentioned a point in regards to quarantine. He stated that it is, or Muslims are duty bound, that they should not go into an infected area, and neither those that are in the infected area should come out of that infected area. And this was based upon the principles set down by the Holy Prophet ﷺ. So he mentioned that today quarantine, or this term quarantine, has come out today, and it's considered to be the birth of wisdom or some other research. But in actuality, quarantining, social distancing, this was actually a teaching that the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, gave to us 1400 years ago. And it just shows beautifully about how when any sort of pandemic, any sort of illness that is contagious, that can be contracted, what to do in those circumstances. So I mean, there's so many more other examples. If I could just quote one more, actually two more. Once it's mentioned at the time of Hazrat Umar Raziyallahu Ta'ala anhu, that the treasurer of Baitul Mal, he had leprosy, and Hazrat Umar said to him that because you are the treasurer, that's why I'm coming into contact with you. But even then, Hazrat Umar told him to stay at a distance. When he was provided with food, Hazrat Umar would say that you should only eat or take from this part of the plate. Hazrat Umar said that if anyone has leprosy, you should distance yourself from them. At another occasion, there was a woman who had contracted leprosy, and she was doing the tawaf, meaning she was circuiting the Kaaba. And when Hazrat Umar came to know about this, he told that woman that, for the welfare of the Muslims, for the welfare of those people that are circuiting the Kaaba, you should go back home. And she abided and adhered to this commandment so much so that when Hazrat Umar passed away, someone came and told her that Umar has now passed away, you may come out of your home. But I mean, look at the level of her obedience, the standard of her obedience. She said, no, how is it possible that the Khalifa has passed away and I would do something adverse to the commandment that he had given me? So I mean, these are just a few examples about how Islam has taught us to not only safeguard ourselves, but also safeguard society at large. So the social distancing, the quarantining that the government is advising today, they're beneficial for us and they're also beneficial for society at large.
Jazakallah Murabbi Sahab for that. Dr. Sahab, if I could now come back to you. We're hearing, that a lot of the governments around the world, sort of their strategy is sort of based on the fact that once you get coronavirus, you're immune and you can't get it again. Are we seeing that is definitely the case? Is there evidence to suggest that once you have coronavirus, you can't get it again? Or is there some sort of, do we still sort of need to look into this further to confirm it?
The thing with this current coronavirus, COVID-19 strain, is that it's just come about. So all the evidence that different countries have got, they are modeling this based on other viruses that are similar to this. So a lot of the evidence they've taken, the other two viruses we've had that are in the same family are the SARS and the MERS, which happened 5-10 years ago, and one happened 15 years ago. So SARS, South Asian Respiratory Syndrome, that we don't see very often now. So that died down on its own to a large extent. MERS, which is the one that came later on, we're still seeing that some travelers that return from the Middle East, they can still get that virus, although we don't see yearly cycles of MERS in the same way that we see for flu. So at the minute, we can only base on how this family has reacted previously. So it's an RNA virus. So that makes it more unstable compared to DNA viruses. So it's more prone to mutate. So based on immunity, I think it's according to the research, I think it's more stable than the flu virus, which we have, which mutates yearly, and then you might become immune to it for 1 year, and then next year it mutates enough that you get the flu again. But with this, it's difficult to say at this point if how long the immunity will last. But I think if they're basing it on the flu virus, which mutates slightly quicker than this, then if you become immune, at least for this cycle till the next cycle comes around, you should have immunity against it. So whether that means you sustain immunity enough, that depends how much this virus will mutate. So it's very early at this point, I would say, to say, will immunity be lifelong or will this be a seasonal thing? But one thing they're saying is future outbreaks, even if they reoccur, it won't be to the same extent as this, because at this point, this is a new virus for all of us and none of us have had immunity to this.
Okay, so Dr. Saab, just correct me if I'm wrong on this, but what you're saying is that that there could be some mutation in this virus, which would mean that in the future it is possible that, we're talking maybe, sometime into the future, it is possible that we could get affected again, but that outbreak wouldn't be, nearly as severe as the one we're seeing currently.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. So even according to the worst case scenario, the future outbreaks shouldn't be as bad as this current one. But whether this becomes a seasonal thing or whether we can get this to die down completely, it's very difficult to say at this point. So epidemiologists, they're working on these models to see what will happen to the virus, how will it affect the populations. So it's difficult to say at this point whether it'll be part of the vaccination schedule, things like that, or whether infants who respond slightly better to the coronavirus, whether they just pick it as part of one of the childhood viruses that they get and develop natural immunity to this, so then they don't get the virus giving them severe symptoms for the rest of their life. So it's very difficult to say, and we don't know how far we'll get in terms of the vaccine. So it's very difficult to say at this point. No country really knows how we're going to exit from this situation in terms of the lockdown, whether we'll have everyone vaccinated fully against this or whether we'll slowly build immunity. That's why for the time being, we're all having to stay in lockdown to give us more time to figure out the answers to these things.
And just on that, Doctor, on the vaccine specifically, as a doctor, do you sort of have any more information than us in terms of when we could see a vaccine, or what the timeline for a vaccine could look like?
No, again, it's probably the same as you guys, what we're hearing in the news. Obviously, all around the world, it's a combined effort. So the companies, it's the fastest race we'll ever have to develop a vaccine. And in different countries, they're taking different approaches. For example, America, they've in some of their trials, they've skipped animal testing to try and fast track it onto human trials. In other countries, they've relied on the previous. So the vaccines, they're based on previous two viruses, the SARS and the MERS, to see what things we can target. So because we're developing these vaccines at a very quick rate, we don't know what the effectiveness will be at this point. Although different countries are starting to say we've got the vaccine in human trial stage, but it's difficult exactly to say when a definitive working vaccine will be out. So again, it's just about buying time and minimizing the deaths till we can have a vaccine made.
Okay, Jazakallah. And Mussawir, if I can now come to you. We've seen an incredible response from the people of the UK in terms of volunteering. The NHS itself has had over 500,000 people, sign up in 24 hours to volunteer. As MD specifically, what is some of the things that we can get involved with, and that we can sort of help out in and sort of make a difference in?
So it doesn't mean that you have to go out to help as well. You can help from home as well. So there's a lot of things that we can do to help each other. If you're in isolation, for example, or you've got somebody who's vulnerable who lives in your house, these are guidelines that we're giving to our Qadam as well. So for example, like myself, I have parents over the age of 60. So we're saying anybody who has parents over the age of 60, they need to stay at home. They can't go out to help. So like myself at the moment, I'm working, looking after the email side of stuff, all the requests that we get. Anything that comes from Humanity First comes to us, and then we pass it out to regions. So you can help by being at home if you can't go out, so you still can help. If you're in a region, you can stay at home. You can maybe make friendly calls, because that's one of the services that we do offer as well. So people who are lonely or at home, mental health issues, etc. We do offer friendly calls, so you can stay at home and do that. You can help the region by calling the council, for example, trying to find ways that we can get food from superstores, etc. The advice that we give to any Khadim who's in that situation who wants to help is email us, tell us your situation, whether it could be a case that you've been told to stay at home for 7 days, or you've got somebody vulnerable in your household. So email us, tell us your situation, your name, your details, and you can help out. There's a lot of ways you can help out. You can be a call handler for Humanity First as well, because we're getting quite a lot of calls coming that way. You can help us, or you can even go down locally, regionally, and help as well.
And just on that, just to go back to things, you said if someone has someone above the age of 60, so their parents or grandparents, for example, in the house, they shouldn't be going out to sort of volunteer, or they should, as a precaution, be staying at home and charity starts at home type thing, making sure that they're helping out at home first?
Yeah, so we've had some strict guidelines that we've sent out. We don't want Qadam to go out if you've got parents over the age of 60. It's not worth the risk. So we want those Qadam to stay at home. The only Qadam that we do want to go out who are in households where they don't have anybody vulnerable in their households. So like you said, charity begins at home ultimately. But there's so many ways that you can still help whilst being at home.
Okay, excellent. And Dr. Saab, very quickly, if I can just come back to you on this, in terms of the vulnerable, who are we defining as the vulnerable? Obviously, there's those who are, 60 years and above, and 65 years, 70 years and above. But apart from those, people who are younger than 60, who else are we defining as vulnerable in this category?
So I think I would say anyone who's unsure whether they're in the vulnerable category or not. The government's put a long list, a very detailed list of who exactly needs to be isolated for or shielded for the next 12 weeks. But some of the common stuff, even for people less than 60, if you're pregnant, we're very unclear on how much of risk you are. So pregnant people with asthma, which is a very common condition, those guys, they definitely need to take a lot of precautions. And the other theme that seems to be common is anyone with comorbidities. The general trend we're seeing in hospital, even in those less than 60s, even common conditions that not everyone considers a medical condition, such as high blood pressure, diabetes. Even just having a couple of those, we've got several patients on our AMU who've just got hypertension, high blood pressure on its own, or just diabetes on their own. And that's enough to give them quite a severe form of coronavirus. So anyone with the comorbidities specifically needs to be very careful. So asthma, diabetes, high blood pressure, respiratory conditions, cardiovascular conditions, all those guys, they're at increased risk. So they need to be completely isolated, and everyone else, I don't think we can get complacent and think we're fine, because we are seeing people without any comorbidities, very young people, getting very severe forms of this and even passing away, unfortunately, from the virus.
Okay. And Murabbi Saab, I would like to ask you that we are unfortunately seeing a loss of life, and we are seeing a number of people die, all the way from very young people to very old people. If someone passes away, is there any sort of indication, or is there any reason to think that this could be a punishment from God, or that that these people that are passing away, that this is some sort of punishment? Is there any sort of indication or reason to think that?
Well, first and foremost, in regards to being a punishment from God Almighty, we have to understand this thing first and foremost, that our beloved Imam Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Khamis, may Allah be his helper, has mentioned that this is not a punishment from God Almighty. And because sometimes people were associating and saying that this is a sign from God. And Azul mentioned that if this had been a sign from God, he would have declared it as being a sign from God. It's very interesting, this question, because this question always arises at the time of natural disasters as well. That there's good people that also die as well. The promised Messiah, alayhi salatu wassalam, he's mentioned this a number of times in his writings. He's mentioned, for example, on one occasion in relation to a drought that took place in Makkah. He mentioned that at that time there were virtuous and righteous people that died, and the same was for those people that were evil and were indulging in vices. And as was mentioned, that those people that are righteous, at the end of the day, they will be rewarded by God Almighty, and those people that are evil, they will be punished. But the main and final thing is that at the end of the day, we are all going to go to God Almighty. Sometimes it happens that some people go before others, some people pass away at an older age as well. So the promised Messiah, والسلام, he's mentioned that in regards to good people as well, at the end of the day, they will be rewarded by God Almighty. And he gave the example of Muslims at the time of the Battle of Badr, that there were Muslims that were also martyred during that battle. But we know with certainty that God Almighty will reward them, and those people that are evil, they will be punished by God Almighty. And Hazrat Masih Maud has even mentioned when the plague broke out in India, he mentioned that it is possible that some of my Jamaat members, they may contract this disease, and has also prayed that may Allah distinguish between the Ahmadis and those that are not accepting me. And Hazur said that at the end of the day, if they do pass away as well, they will also attain the rank of martyrdom. But at the end of the day, it's our duty, we are duty bound. The Promised Messiah ﷺ has also mentioned it, and President Hazur has also mentioned it, that we should pray for the whole of mankind. Unfortunately, because it's affecting every single person, up to date, there are cases in nearly every single country. I believe on BBC I was reading the other day, I think there's only 10 countries in the world that are COVID-19 free. So it's something. It's a global pandemic, and at the end of the day, we are duty bound towards mankind and towards humanity to pray for them, and pray for their salvation as well. So these are the things that we need to keep in mind in light of the COVID-19.
Jazakallah, Murabbi Sahab. And Dr. Saab, if I can come back to you now, when this virus first started in Wuhan, it was, what we were hearing from the news is that it's a virus that's worse than flu, but it's only really worse than flu for those people who are ill or have, a lot of other sort of underlying health conditions. It seems in the last sort of 2 weeks or so that we're hearing stories of people who are dying, who are perceived to be, very healthy. So we've recently had the story of the 13-year-old with no underlying health conditions who's passed away, and then recently 2 nurses who again were perceived to be very healthy, who also passed away. Is there any sort of, reason why people who are young are also susceptible, or is there any sort of reason why we are seeing, younger people dying as well now?
No, I think that's one thing other countries like Italy have already been trying to figure out why. Initially, it was the older people that were dying and ending up on ITU, and then as the pandemic goes further down its course, younger and younger people start being admitted to ITU. So the reason for that, it's I think because it's so new, it's difficult to understand. But it's clear that, like you're saying, one of the nurses that was from our hospital, a 35-year-old, ended up on ITU. So this virus is very difficult to say. This guy is young with no comorbidities, he won't get a serious infection. I mean, on the whole, we're seeing patterns that yes, it's people with underlying comorbidities get it, but in terms of why it's happening, you're having a spectrum of disease. You're having from Prince Charles, who's got the virus at an old age and not shown many symptoms and is recovered, to in our hospital we're having 40-year-olds with no underlying comorbidities on 15 liters of oxygen. So it's very difficult to say why that's happening. There's theories out there that some younger people who are exposed to high viral loads, say for example you've been on a tube in London or gone to a pub, and 3 or 4 people around you have been asymptomatic with coronavirus, and you've got a high viral load, whether that's giving you more severe form of infection rather than getting milder symptoms. So there's theories out there trying to explain why some people get more severe form of infections. For the other thing they're starting to see is men are getting the infection in a much more severe form compared to women. But because this is so early, all this is rough speculation about how your immune system responds different in men versus women. And very young people, do they have better immune systems, so they're able to fight the infection out better compared to older people? But these are all theories, and none of this has been confirmed because we don't have enough time. We haven't had enough time to come up with the definitive reasons for any of these questions.
Okay. And we've heard from the government about the benefits of staying at home, isolation, and washing hands, and sort of the the reason for why these protect you is very obvious. Everyone sort of understands those. Is there any other things, precautions that we can take to sort of, reduce our chances of getting the virus, or if we do get the virus, not progressing to a stage where we need sort of intensive treatment?
So I think the government's message, I think, is pretty correct and pretty clear about staying at home, reducing the burden on the healthcare and saving lives. So the epidemiologists, they look into multiple things and how much it can reduce the rate of transmission from one person to another. So the aim is to reduce that contagiousness ratio to as low as you can. So the main things yet are the social distancing, keeping the elderly completely shielded. So those two things add a large part to reducing the transmission. And what we're doing in hospitals is trying to keep that 2 meters away from workers at all time. Hand washing is, we're washing our hands very regularly. Anytime, and the other thing is to avoid touching your mouth, nose and eyes completely. So if you need to touch your mouth or your nose or your eyes, make sure your hands have been completely washed for 20 seconds before you touch those parts, because that's where the virus is going to get into your system. So on top of the isolation, it's about regular hand washing and about avoiding touching your nose and your eyes and your mouth. That's what we've got on our posters in the NHS. And that's probably the best way we can reduce transmission. And obviously, if you have symptoms, then it's even more important for those guys and the whole family to stay isolated, especially.
Okay, Jazakallah. And Mussawir Sahib, on self-isolation, many people, in the Jamaat and in the UK have relatives who, not in the same house as them, but, don't live too far from them. And if we want to, protect the relatives, if someone is self-isolating and can't go to help their relatives, what sort of support can we get them? So say someone's parents live in a different house to them, and obviously they want to protect their parents so they don't go to visit them. What type of support could they get their parents?
So call the Humanity First helpline, email as well, make us aware, give us the details. What we'll do is we'll get Qadam to go out, make sure they do whatever it is, whether it's shopping, whether it's post the mill, anything that they need. We make sure that the Qadam do go and help them. We've had a lot of cases like that, internally and externally, where we've had, I think, we've had a family where they live in London, but the parents are living by themselves up north. And they've come to us, and we've made sure that the people on the ground are there. They keep in touch with them as well. So it's not a case that you have to keep ringing every week saying that they need essentials, whether it's eggs, milk, bread, etc. What happens is the moment that you tell us, we keep in touch with relatives and we make sure that they don't go without. So we continue doing that every week.
Excellent. And in just another question for yourself, Mussawir, the homeopathic medicine that Hazur has specifically that we should all be taking, how can we sort of get there's a few households who still haven't had access to that. Can you sort of guide us in where we could get access to that?
So firstly, it's going to your local sadr because they have all the resources in regards to that. But if you are struggling, which we've had a few cases where Qadam can't get hold of it, just contact us. We do have Qadam who are actively dropping off for their local sadrs anyways. So that's the procedure at the moment. I myself as well have had some as well done in the same procedure. So just contact us via the helpline or the email, and we'll make sure that the Qadam can go out and try get hold of it and make sure we do give it to the household.
Jazakallah. And Murabbi Sahib, I would like to come to you now. What do you think are the similarities of the current epidemic we're seeing as compared to the flu epidemic at the time of Hazrat Muslim Maud radhiyallahu anhu?
At the time of Hazrat Muslim Maud radhiyallahu anhu, there was the outbreak of they call it the Spanish influenza, but you can also call it the influenza. And around that time in 1918, millions of people were infected with it, and unfortunately there were millions of mortalities due to this, and hundreds upon thousands of casualties due to this influenza virus. It's very interesting that the Khuddam during that time, or you can say the youngsters of the Jamaat at that time, some of them had contracted that virus, but they were going out serving mankind as much as they could. So much so, it's written in Tarikh Ahmadiyyat, which is the history of Ahmadiyyat. It's written in there that they would not stop until they fell down due to the weakness of the virus that they had contracted, or the illness that they had contracted. And Hazrat Muslim Maud, he himself contracted the virus, and he also wrote a long will which is based upon 2 or 3 pages. So this was that zeal, that passion that the youngsters of the Jamaat had at that time to serve the Jamaat. And actually the promised Messiah ﷺ, it's really, in one sense, it's amazing that if you were to put all of the writings of the promised Messiah ﷺ in regards to the various pandemics, epidemics, and the instructions that he's given, it shows his empathy for mankind. And he's also mentioned, especially towards the doctors of the community, and also he's used the word khidmat karne wale, meaning those that are serving, the members of the community that are serving, that they should show empathy and sympathy, but they should also take precautionary measures at the same time as well. So Hazrat Masih Islam has mentioned that, for example, if a person has contracted the virus, so he was speaking at the time of the plague, of course, that if somebody has contracted the virus, then you as a servant, as one who is going out to help, you can go to their home, but don't go inside their home. From their door, you can ask them of the do they need any supplies, or what kind of support do they need, what our Khidmat-e-Khalq is doing right now as well. So it's there's this instruction of Hazrat Masih Maud, and we are seeing as we have Dr. Ali Saab with us, and Mussawir, who is working from the Khidmat-e-Khalq department, that they are those they are the living picture of that sympathy and empathy that the promised Messiah ﷺ desired that his Jamaat should display at certain times as well. And coming back to the time of Hazrat Muslim Maud Hazrat Muslim Maud also mentioned, at that time he told the Jamaat members that they should also drink ginger and cinnamon tea as well. So this is one sort of remedy that he, of course, told the Jamaat, and mashallah, obviously we see that many of the Jamaat members, they regained their health, and Hazrat Muslim Maud also regained his health. But the essence of that time was, and the similarity is, that the way the Jamaat members, the youngsters of the Jamaat, was serving the larger community, not the Ahmadiyya community only, but the larger community. So today we are seeing in America, in various parts of the world, wherever this COVID-19 has been discovered, wherever it is in large numbers, even in India as well, our youngsters, our doctors, they're on the front line, and they're serving their communities as best as they can. So they are that living illustration of humanity first, as such. So it's a very beautiful spectacle that we are seeing, that even in times of we can say challenging times, worrying times, we are coming together, we are united, and we are trying our best to help our community at large. So it's a very mashallah, may Allah bless all of our doctors and those that are on the front line. And again, the fundamental thing is, as I mentioned before, Hazrat Masih Maud has also mentioned this point as well, that sometimes it happens that a certain illness is considered that it's not curable, it's incurable. So Hazrat Masih Maud has mentioned that even through prayer, that illness could be cured as well. So our fundamental and the final tool that we have, so obviously we will take the precautionary measures, we will show empathy, we will help our community members, but the final tool that we have is prayer, and inshallah this will get us through these challenging times.
Jazakallah for that inspiring comment, Murabbi Sahab. Dr. Saab, I'd just like to come to you on one thing again. So smoking, we know that it has many negative effects, associated to cancer and a number of other, negative effects on our health. Is there any sort of indication or any sort of reason that smoking can, cause COVID-19 or coronavirus to affect you, more worse than if you weren't a smoker?
From my personal experience, it's been difficult to say what the effect of smoking is in terms of severity of symptoms, but it's clear from all the other respiratory conditions that smoking is definitely not going to help you, and in terms of the severity, it does tend to make the condition worse, because with this virus, if you start getting into the second week where this virus starts taking over your lungs, what you really need is for your remaining lung that's in good health to give you the best reserve possible. So even if the virus takes out 60, 70, 80, whatever percent of your lung it takes out, if you want to give yourself the best lung reserves to be able to cope whilst your body fights off the infection. So if smoking is going to damage the rest of your lungs, it's going to reduce your reserve. So probably means that you'll be more prone to having more severe symptoms as a result of COVID. But again, because the virus is so new, it's difficult to say which risk factors are leading to worse severity. So I think we've only briefly started understanding these kind of things.
Okay, Jazakallah. And then one more question that we've had that's come in is that if someone has a persistent cough but no fever, could that be an indication of coronavirus? Is that something that could be a symptom?
Yeah, so I think, again, government advice-wise, they've said if it's a higher temperature or a persistent cough, you should self-isolate. So you don't want to take a risk to say whether this cough is coronavirus or not. In hospital, we're seeing the full spectrum of conditions. We've seen, when we're taking histories from these patients, some of them, for the first week, they've said they had this dry cough. It's becoming quite classical. I've had a dry cough for the first week, nothing much else. And then as they get to day 7, day 8, I started having some shortness of breath. My body started breaking down. I had fever, muscle aches, things like that. So that dry cough can definitely be one sign that it's the start of coronavirus, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is coronavirus. It might just be a dry cough for whatever other reason. And because we're trying to watch out for the symptoms of it, we might just have a little bit of a cough from something we've ate or just a normal common cold. But because it's so difficult to say, I think if it is possible that you can isolate yourself and distance yourself from others, I think it'll be quite wise to do that, because we're seeing even people who are completely asymptomatic, we're picking those people up as well. So if you've got something that's suggestive that you might have coronavirus, I would take all the precautions and try and reduce the spread onto other people. But yeah, in general, some of the trends we have been seeing, even amongst the doctors, is they have a slight sore throat or dry cough, and they're thinking, oh, this probably is too mild for it to be coronavirus. And then later on, we're not being tested, so we can't say for sure whether that was coronavirus, but then it develops into the higher temperatures. So I'll take the full precautions, but I wouldn't get worried that, oh, my symptoms are going to progress or I've got coronavirus, but I would take all the precautions.
Okay, and currently the government guidance is that if you have these symptoms but they're mild symptoms, you should stay at home and you shouldn't go straight to A&E or your GP. Mm-hmm. At what point do you think people should start to, be a bit more worried and should start to think, okay, now I need to actually go and seek some face-to-face medical help?
So the concerning bits are mainly the shortness of breath. So if your symptoms, especially if you've had these symptoms, like I was saying, for about a week, and then you start developing shortness of breath, you need to have a very low threshold for going to A&E. If your shortness of breath is suddenly getting worse, then at that point, you need to go to A&E, have a chest x-ray done, have bloods done, have a full set of observations so we know where you stand. Because with this virus, some people can deteriorate very quickly, so they can go from being stable and not requiring any oxygen to unfortunately ending up on ITU within a 24-hour period. So if you're starting to develop shortness of breath, I would say take that very seriously. And of course, any other symptoms that you feel you're not managing, if your temperature is getting too much, then I think we shouldn't leave it too long. We want to give antibiotics and things like that a chance to work for secondary infections that you might have on top of the flu.
Okay, Jazakallah. And Mussawir Sahib, the next question I'll come to you with, and Dr. Sahib, if you feel you want to jump in as well. Obviously, life hasn't stopped. People still need to get prescriptions for other sort of medical ailments. Is that something that Humanity First Khidmat-e-Khalq can help with as well?
Yes, of course. So we're actively going out. If it's medicines, anything that you need, if you're stuck at home, you're in isolation, we're there to assist. So whether it's homeopathic, whether it's shopping, whether it's prescriptions, we're happy to help. So anything, that you do need at home, we're happy to help. We want to help everyone.
Okay, and in terms of the actual sort of logistics behind the prescription, would the Khidam just figure it out with the family in terms of getting the paper prescription and then heading to the pharmacy, or how?
So it's just communication. That's all it is. The Khadim or whoever it is will speak with the family. They'll find out where they are, what the prescription is, how to go about it. In some cases, obviously, we're trying to be paperless as much as possible, whether it's money with prescriptions as well. So in some cases, they don't actually physically need it. They can just go to the pharmacy and they can contact the pharmacy and say, look, somebody's going to come collect on our behalf. And that's how it seems to be working at the moment. Same with money when the Qadam are going out to do shopping, we're doing bank transfers instead, rather than handling cash, or if there is cash involved, it'll always be in an envelope and the 2 meters will always be there when dropping items off.
Okay, excellent. Jazakallah. And Murabbi Sahib, next I'd like to come to you again, and again, come to Dr. Sahib with the same question. Ramadan is coming up. Obviously, that means prolonged periods of fasting and obviously, the other sort of activities that take place in Ramadan. Should we be worried how are we going to approach Ramadan this year as compared to any other year?
I mean, yes, the precautionary measures should definitely be taken into account. First and foremost, if you are displaying any sort of those symptoms, if you're ill, then obviously you'll fall under the category of Murid, and therefore, you can complete your fast at some other time, and when you're healthier. So in that regards, those people that are experiencing symptoms or are ill or frail, they should not fast during this period as well. Those of us obviously that are if you want to put it up to the challenge or healthy, we can fast, but again, everybody knows their ability, everybody knows their strength as such. So therefore, again, if you are feeling ill, you will come under the category of Murid, and God Almighty has granted permission to those who are suffering with any sort of ailments, who are ill, that they should not fast. They can complete their fast when they regain health. So in this terms, obviously, it's challenging times, definitely. But Ramadan is that period where we try our best to get closer to God, and as such, during this period as well, we should constantly be praying for the world at large as well. But other than that, there's as such no restrictions, due to the coronavirus. Of course, the symptoms, if you're ill, you will be excluded from keeping a fast. But if you're healthy enough, then yes, you must keep the fast.
Okay, and Dr. Saab, on this as well, is there any reason that we should be, worried or feel that fasting can increase our chances of catching the illness, or is there no sort of evidence or anything that sort of suggests that?
Well, I think like with all the other things, very little is known about this. So there won't be much medical studies out there to say what the impact of fasting is. But I agree with Murabbi Sahib. He's given a very good answer there, that we just have to be very sensible about this and use our common sense when it comes to fasting. So if we're feeling fit and healthy and 100% in ourselves, then I think you can go ahead and fast. But if you're feeling under the weather with any of those symptoms and you feel you might have coronavirus coming on, or you're not feeling 100% in yourself, then I think it's probably best that you, like you're saying, like Murabbi Sahib is saying, if you weren't 100%, then avoid fasting for that day. And then the rest is same as the government advice, make sure the rest of the areas of focus is not relaxed. So hand hygiene, social distancing, when we're opening and breaking the fast, maintaining all the other things that are currently in place, they need to be kept there. So I don't think for a healthy person, fasting would increase the risk of transmission.
Okay, Jazakallah. And recently I went to one of these health food shops to get some vitamin C tablets.
Yeah.
You see so many messages coming across on WhatsApp and other things about, vitamin C and lemon water and all these things. Is there any sort of evidence to suggest that I should be eating vitamin C or supplementing it?
Again, I think America, they've some of their studies, they're trialing high dose vitamin C. So because we're trying to throw anything at this virus, there's a range of things. Japan's trying their own drugs. We're trying a few drugs in combination to see what works and what doesn't. So at the minute, we don't have a definitive thing that works or not. But in terms of the diet, I think this is the point where having a well-balanced diet, eating healthy, keeping yourself physically fit, keeping yourself mentally fit, all those things will help. So we have to keep following the basic advice that we give to patients and people in normal times as well, about keeping yourself, eat healthy, look after yourself physically. And in this period, I think mental health is quite important, keeping yourself productive, keeping yourself occupied, not getting over anxious and not listening to being stuck to the news 24 hours a day. So it's just about having everything in balance, I would say. But yeah, we are having patients asking us different things. I had a patient who was on 3 antibiotics and he wanted to try his almonds, and I said, yep, go ahead. You probably know as much as almonds as we do. So yeah, okay, you can try, but I wouldn't overdose on anything specific till we have the medical knowledge on this.
So, very similar to what Hazur mentioned in his recent Friday sermon about keeping generally healthy, generally fit, having a good night's sleep, avoiding junk food. And just to come back to what you mentioned about medication, we've seen in America that they're trialing this, I think it's hydrochloroquine,
Yep.
If I'm wrong, Dr. Sab, but these different sort of medications, is this something that we're doing in the UK as well? And does it work?
So whether it works is too early to say. We've had a few small-scale studies that France has released about hydroxychloroquine combined with azithromycin, which is an antibiotic. And I think, I'm not sure on the exact figures, that was tried on about 20 to 30 people maximum. So currently, Oxford University, they have started a trial, which they've encouraged all junior doctors F1 and up to, they can take part in. So we've all started signing up to this trial. It's very quick. It's around half an hour of videos to see how the trial is carried out. And anyone who's being admitted to the hospital with a confirmed diagnosis who's over 18, if they give us the consent, we can randomize them into different arms. So the drugs we're trying is the control, and we're comparing that to some HIV medication, which works on RNA viruses. So in theory, we're seeing whether it'll work against this RNA virus. We're trying hydroxychloroquine. We're trying dexamethasone, which is a steroid to try and dampen the immune response, which suddenly comes on, known as ARDS, and you suddenly get worse. And then beta interferon, which is a bit more complicated, which we're leaving for our ITU patients. So that trial is going ahead, and they're reviewing the results of that day to day. And if any treatment arm is more successful than the other, then we can say add this to the treatment. So far, we're having to use just a broad spectrum antibiotics. We can add Tamiflu, which covers viruses. But so guidelines, we don't know exactly what thing is working or what isn't. We're just trying to cover any secondary infections, trying to minimize the effect of the virus. And apart from that, so far it's just been about giving patients enough oxygen till their own body starts clearing the virus itself.
Okay, Jazakallah. And just to come to a slightly more somber topic, on the topic of janazah prayer and janazahs, Murabbi Sahib, what is the current sort of, and unfortunately we, in this time people are passing away as usual, and unfortunately some people will pass away possibly due to coronavirus as well. What is sort of the Jamaat guidelines on janazahs? How are we sort of going ahead with those?
So again, in regards to the janazah prayer, first and foremost, the Jamaat is advocating that whatever the guidelines have been set out or set forth from the government, they should be fully adhered to. And as we know, before the janazah prayer, there's the whole procedure of washing the body. So again, the Jamaat has mentioned that family members, they should seek medical advice whether the body should be washed or not. If it should be, then the proper attire should be worn. And again, for the janazah prayer itself, they are limiting the numbers as well. Even if you want to offer condolences, the Jamaat's guidelines is that please do not visit those homes, but rather through the telephone, you can contact those people and offer your condolences as well. So whatever instructions the government is giving, we need to adhere to them 110%, if you want to put it like that. And at the end of the day, because it's there for our welfare and well-being, and obviously, those people that are passing away during this time, it's truly difficult for those families. Again, the instructions of the Jamaat is adhere to the government's guidelines, and this is better for everyone as such.
Jazakallah. Mussawir Sahib, one topic I'd like to cover with you is Jamaat is doing a lot to help our own people in terms of all that you've discussed here today. What are some of the things that Humanity First and Jamaat in general is doing to help the community at large?
So at the moment, we're here to help anyone and everyone, whether it's your local neighbour, whether it's someone in a different city, it's somebody's parents that's not part of the Jamaat, we're here to serve. So as Qadam, we're approaching every local council in the country where we're based. So we're communicating with them as well. Any other charitable organisations like food banks, etc. Some regions are actually partnering up with them as well. So we're trying to get around every obstacle that we are facing. We're trying to get around it as much as possible. So we want to help as much as possible in any way possible. So at the moment, the only thing that we're advising Qadam is, follow the government guidelines, but also try to help your neighbours, people around you as well. Whether that's through the Next Door app as well. We're trying to go through social media at the moment as well, where you can communicate with neighbours whilst, via your mobile phone. But we want to help mankind. Ultimately, that's what we're here to do. So we want to serve as much as possible.
Jazakallah. And we've unfortunately come to our last question. So I'll just like to come back to Dr. Ali on this. And I'm hoping we can finish off on some good news, Dr. Ali. Do you have any sort of indication or any sort of timeline or any idea of when this pandemic, will end and when we can get back to life as normal?
No, I wish I had a magic answer there. I think the things you guys are hearing on Sky News from the epidemiologist side of things, that's probably the latest information we have. I think what they're expecting is the next week to 2 weeks in our hospitals. They've said we're probably expecting our peak to be around the April 14th mark. And then from that point, hopefully we can start getting our curve flat that they keep talking about. And if we stick to these lockdown measures, which I think will be here for at least a month, probably longer, if we can keep following this, then I think they're saying our early data in terms of that transmission, it's looking reassuring for now. It's about one person is passing it on to half a person. So so in that way, the virus, we can get the numbers low, but that will just help suppress the number of cases. So at that point, we might not need to be in a full lockdown, but we can ease the lockdown and still maintain social distancing and see how we get on with that. And if it's the case that the numbers start picking up again, we might have to make the lockdown more strict. So it might be a case of releasing the lockdown and going back in it, unfortunately. So as of yet, I think all the countries are trying to figure out what they're calling the exit strategy, is how eventually we're going to come out of this. So I think most countries at this point are relying on the vaccination approach, because I think numbers-wise, developing herd immunity will have a large number of people pass away, unfortunately, before we get herd immunity. So till we get the vaccine, I think it might be a case of being in lockdown for now. I think the measures at the minute are quite strict, which they need to be, because we've come right towards the peak and we need to get the curve to be flat now. But once the cases are down, we might be able to get on with the lives a little bit more. There'll still be measures in place with social distancing, and it depends on testing as well. So I think that you guys are probably hearing just the same as we've got in terms of testing as many people as we can, and the people that have got immunity to this, they can be given their certificates. That's what other countries are doing, and maybe letting those workers with immunity who are in key jobs start working again, whilst we're still protecting the vulnerable and those that still haven't got the condition. And if the cases are low enough, maybe if anyone with mild symptoms or mild symptoms, if we can test them and then test everyone who they've come into contact with, that might be another way of cutting the virus numbers down further. So it's going to be a combination approach, but I think each country at the minute doesn't exactly know when we can come out of this completely.
Okay. We are unfortunately going to have to end our question and answer session here today. Jazakallah to our excellent panel for answering everyone's questions today. My apologies if we've unfortunately not had time to cover your question today. But Jazakallah for everyone who's tuned in to watch. Assalamu alaikum.